events is currently unfolding in Eastern Africa, where catastrophic flooding has swiftly followed the most severe drought the region has seen in over 40 years. Scientific evidence clearly and strongly links these extreme weather events to human-induced climate change. Studies indicate that droughts are now at least 100 times more likely in parts of Africa than they were in pre-industrial era. This translates into a dramatic reduction in long-term rainfall, while short-term rainfall patterns remain erratic and unpredictable. All of us are already living in this dire reality. Kenya has been besieged by relentless torrents that have claimed lives and displaced countless communities. The ensuing injury, loss, and damage extends beyond immense human toll to the destruction of vital infrastructure and the disruption of critical supply chains across many vital sectors. Beyond mere logistical challenges, the devastation further complicates the daily struggle for survival for many households and communities. The situation in our Horn of Africa region, in many other developing countries, lay bare the harsh reality of climate change. It is a poignant reminder of its disproportionate impact and a call to action for all of us to mobilize rapidly to address this imbalance with urgency, solidarity, and inclusivity. We are also here because we are convinced of our collective ability to effect change. Our mission for this COP is clear: to foster radical cooperation that steers the world firmly back onto a 1.5 degrees Celsius ceiling. Equally critical, we are here to affirm our commitment to provide robust support to those of us who have contributed least to climate change, yet bear its most catastrophic impacts. As Africa, we are ready to play our part in full. The Nairobi Declaration, which we adopted at the conclusion of the first Africa Climate Summit, set out the vision and pathway for Africa to be a vital part of the global solution to the existential climate challenge we face. The declaration captures the consensus of the African government leaders for climate-positive growth that harnesses our ample human natural resources. It commits us to triple renewable energy capacity, establish green manufacturing, halt and reverse deforestation, promote sustainable agriculture, promote nature-based solutions, support the global call to phase down coal plants and eliminate inefficient fossil fuel production subsidies, and further amplify calls for a new global financial architecture and global carbon tax. In Kenya, we have transformed this vision into tangible goals. Our plan is ambitious to expand our current energy capacity of approximately 3 gigawatts to 100 gigawatts of entirely renewable power by 2050 as a cornerstone of our green industrialization strategy. This level of ambition must be matched by the global commitment to achieve concrete, action-oriented outcomes. The first global stocktake at this COP is not just a checkpoint. It is a crucial step forward in our collective response to climate change. It must therefore encompass strategies for mitigation, adaptation, addressing loss and damage, and fundamentally, the means of its implementation. Such a comprehensive approach will pave the way for a more inclusive and robust set of nationally determined contributions in the next cycle. At the heart of our discussion at this COP28 must be a package of ambitious energy transition and investment goals and incentives aligned with our commitment to maintain a global temperatures within 1.5 degree limit. This entails a pledge to triple renewable energy capacity and double energy efficiency by 2030, alongside a significant reduction in fossil fuel dependency. I commend my brother, the COP presidency, for their efforts to converge the world around this global goal. The strong participation of traditional hydrocarbon energy leaders in this global endeavor has transformed the conversation and brought us closer to consensus based on democratic inclusion and the best spirit of collective action, as well as multilateralism. Notably, the vision demands deliberate support for developing countries. In the past 2 decades, only 2% of the $3 trillion invested globally in renewable energy has reached Africa, despite the continent's vast resource endowments and great need for investment. The consequences of this investment gap are starkly evident. More than 600 million Africans are deprived of basic energy services, which are fundamental to dignified living and access to essential services such as healthcare and education. The challenge is compounded by the fact that nearly 1 billion people in Africa do not have access to clean cooking amenities. A tendency to ignore Africa's developmental and industrialization needs and the failure to invest in our burgeoning young generation is no longer a tenable proposition. We cannot afford to neglect the immense potential or ignore the pressing needs of a continent on the cusp of transformative growth. Turning Africa into a green powerhouse is not just essential for the continent, it is also vital for global industrialization, decarbonization. Going forward, clear, actionable roadmaps for implementations are required. In turn, these call for a unified global effort to mobilize the necessary capital for both development and climate action. To echo the consensus projected at the Paris Summit, we must establish a new global financing pact which ensures that no country is ever forced to choose between its development aspirations and necessary climate action. Fundamentally, this is a call for an integrated approach where economic growth and developmental sustainability are not mutually exclusive, but are pursued in tandem for the greater global good. Finally, the urgency and magnitude of our task calls for far greater transformation than the incremental progress we have seen over the past 30 years. We need to execute quantum leaps in terms of both our strategic actions and technological innovation. What lies at stake is more than just a climate issue. It is a matter of guaranteeing dignified living and livelihoods for billions who lack basic necessities. Our response must match the scale of this global challenge with boldness and innovation. Given this context, the long-standing adversarial dynamic between global North and global South proves practically counterproductive. This division has hindered our ability to unite and leverage our collective strengths and robbed us of tremendous opportunities. Yet, in the face of a threat that endangers the health of our planet and our very existence, we must find in collective action a force that neutralizes and transcends these divisions. Climate change does not respect artificial distinctions, traditional boundaries, or old antagonisms. Instead, it should unite us against a shared, borderless challenge. Consequently, our approach must be collaborative, inclusive, and anchored in justice. This means making decisions that prioritize the well-being of every person while acknowledging that climate action is inextricably linked to social justice and equity. In this room, ladies and gentlemen, we have the power, the means, and most of all, the responsibility to act. The world is watching, and what we deliver at COP28 will be a testament of whether we are capable guardians of this planet and competent stewards of its stability. COP28 and the global stocktake are elements of a strong and clear call to conscience on behalf of the global community. Let us not be satisfied with another minimal increment, but rather let us make this COP a turning point towards a just, equal world of opportunity, safe from the looming threat of a climate disaster. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Shavkat Mirziyoyev, President of Uzbekistan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished heads of delegations, I echo the words of sincere gratitude to the President of the United Arab Emirates, His Highness Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, for the invitation to this undoubtedly historic summit and the exceptional organization of the forum. We commend the global initiative of the United Arab Emirates in combating climate change and its significant contribution to green development. I take this opportunity to extend my heartfelt congratulations to the United Arab Emirates on the National Day and wish continued prosperity to its people. Dear participants of the summit, the climate problems have already turned into a main threat to global sustainable development. These challenges are even affecting the global geopolitical landscape. The adverse effects of climate change are particularly evident in Central Asia and its neighboring regions due to one of the most tragic contemporary environmental disasters, the Aral Sea catastrophe. In this regard, I would like to draw your attention to the following facts. In our region, the increase in air temperature is twice as high as global average indicator. In recent years, the number of extremely hot days has increased 2 times, and 1/3 of the glaciers have melted down completely. The soil erosion is impacting the lifestyle of over 30 million people in our region. Strong sand and dust storms are becoming a new normal. Water scarcity, air pollution, loss of biodiversity, and a sharp yield decrease in agriculture are ever growing. In short, these global challenges are reaching their peak point in our vast region. Esteemed participants of the summit, transition to a green economy and achieving carbon neutrality are the key strategic objectives of new Uzbekistan. In recent years, the share of alternative energy in our country has doubled. In cooperation with the United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, China, Turkey, and other foreign partners, we are working on creating 25 gigawatts of renewable energy capacity by 2030. We have made first practical steps on green hydrogen production as part of the Yashil Makan Green Space Initiative. 1 billion trees are being planted in our country. We intend to increase the area of green zones in cities to 30% in order to create a resilient protective belt on this is a script of the Aral Sea. We have planted forests on the area of over 2 million hectares. With your permission, I would like to share the following proposals. First, we call for finalization of the global climate change adaptation framework as part of the Paris Agreement. We are developing the adaptation strategy within the Central Asian Climate Dialogue Platform. Additionally, we highly value yesterday's agreement on the establishment of loss and damage funds. Second, global transition to a low-carbon economy must be fair, transparent, and inclusive. The interests of developing countries that are suffering great losses due to climate change must be taken into account. It would be expedient to consider these urgent problems as part of G7 and G20 agendas. Third, in accordance with the resolution of the United Nations General Assembly, we are keen to transform the RLC region from environmental disaster zone to a hub of innovations, technology, and new opportunities. In order to implement advanced technology, experience, and solutions in this region, I invite you all to a close cooperation to set up an international climate technology expo hub. Fourth, the time itself requires from us to actively fight climate change by extensively using scientific knowledge and promoting joint research. I invite leading and renowned scholars and experts from your respective countries to participate in the Climate Scientific Forum to be organized under the auspices of Green University in Tashkent. I believe that such pressing issues as prevention of land degradation, sustainable water use, ensuring guaranteed food security, and other issues will be included in the agenda of the forum. Fifth, we intend to organize a conference in Uzbekistan in 2024 on the topic of climate migration in cooperation with the United Nations. We also propose to develop the Green Jobs Initiative and establish a center for modeling the climate change impact on employment in collaboration with the International Labour Organization. In order to effectively address climate issues and actively engage youth, we are ready to organize COP Youth Conference at high level. Esteemed friends, Uzbekistan remains committed to universal ideas on fighting against climate change. For this noble purpose, I call for support for our initiative to hold the Samarkand International Climate Forum next year and to adopt a special resolution of the United Nations General Assembly which reflects our regional approach. I firmly believe that the results of today's summit will bring closer the friendly states and the peoples in ensuring a more sustainable, prosperous, and secure future for our planet. I thank you all for your attention.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my honor and distinct pleasure to welcome His Highness Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, Vice President and Deputy Prime Minister, Chairman of the Presidential Court of the United Arab Emirates. Your Highness, you have the floor.
In the name of God, the Merciful, the Compassionate, dear participants, peace and blessings be upon you. We welcome you to the United Arab Emirates, the country sums up the whole world and that has grand ambitions for a world that enjoys peace and progress. We work today for tomorrow and we cooperate for the generations of the future. History teaches us that without cooperation we wouldn't have reached this level of progress. The success of humanity was only a result of the scientific cooperation and the cultural communication and the exchange of knowledge. This has gone on for thousands of years, and peoples and countries have exchanged for millennia. In the name and on behalf of the people of the UAE, we affirm that we are serious in our quest to address climate change. We were the first to pledge to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050. We have allocated $163 billion for expansion of renewables and to transition towards new and renewable energies. His Royal Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, may God protect him, has announced that the creation of a fund worth of $30 billion to diversify and to support climate action. We also have a governmental working group that leads our agenda of climate action. We take pride in hosting the world and this global climate action summit. Again, we welcome you in the United Arab Emirates and we reaffirm our firm commitment to work for Earth. And we echo and repeat our our firm position that communication and cooperation between nations is the only way to surmount the climate challenges besetting Earth. Thank you. And peace and blessings be upon you.
Thank you, Your Highness. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, President of Brazil. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. Saudin Al-Jaber, the President of COP28, Your Excellencies, guests, it's a great responsibility to be here in Dubai today. We are facing what may be the greatest challenge that humanity has faced till now. Instead of uniting forces, the world is going to wars. It feeds divisions and deepens poverty and inequalities. The path of COP28 to COP30 in Brazil will dictate our future. Here, we will have the first global assessment about the Paris Agreement. At COP29, we will define a new quantifiable way to financing. And in the city of Belém, we will formulate our National Determined Contributions, NDCs. The last IPCC report is categorical about the danger of the increase of the global temperature will go beyond 1.5 degrees. The goal of the Paris Agreement is to keep between 1.5 to 2 degrees Celsius, which is not sufficient to contain the global warming at a safe level. We have a collective problem of ination or a lack of ambition. The NDCs that we have today are not being implemented in the pace that we expected. And even if they were, they would not keep the temperature below the limit or the cap of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Brazil adjusted its NDC and committed itself to reduce 48% of the emissions till the year 2025 and 53% till 2030. Besides reaching climate neutrality till 2050. Our NDC is much more ambitious than of many countries that pollute the atmosphere since the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century. And we keep the firm commitment to have zero deforestation in the Amazon till 2030. We already managed to reduce almost 50% in the first 10 months of this year, which avoided the emission of 250 million tons of carbon in the atmosphere. But many countries from the global south will not have the proper conditions to implement their NDCs and neither to take more ambitious goals. The most vulnerable countries cannot have to choose between to fight climate change and fight poverty. They will have to do both things. The principle of common responsibility, but differentiated, is unnegotiable. To threat that goes against any basic notion of climate fairness. This notion demands that we should comply with the obligations for financing and technology transfer. It is unacceptable that the promise of $100 billion per year that was taken by the developed countries doesn't get out of a piece of paper, while just in the year 2021, the military expenses reached $2 trillion. In Brazil, the climate emergency is already a reality. The Amazon region is going through, in this moment, an unprecedented drought. The level of the rivers is the lowest in 120 years. I could never imagine that this would happen in a place where we have the greatest reservoir of fresh water of the world. But the future of the Amazon doesn't rely only on the Amazonians. The deforestation of the world only answers for 10% of the global emissions. Even if we did not cut any tree, the Amazon could reach a point of no way back if other countries don't do their share. The increase of the global temperature could trigger an unreversible process of salinization of the Amazon. The energy, manufacturing industry, and transportation emit much more greenhouse gas effects. We have to deal with all these sources. That's why Brazil is proposing the mission 1.5, a collective mission that will keep us on the tracks of 1.5 degrees Celsius. In 2 years, till COP30, we will have to double the efforts to implement the NDCs that we committed ourselves. And in the city of Berlin, we have to announce more daring NDCs and to guarantee the means to implement and make them concrete. The developing countries need positive incentives to promote measures of climate action aligned with their development priorities. In Brazil, in the indigenous people mythology that says that the Amazon River was born from the tears that came from the moon. The moon had to leave aside its love for the sun so that the earth would not be destroyed by the heat of the sun. If we don't leave our differences aside on behalf of something bigger, the life and planet will be endangered and it will be too late to cry. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Charles Michel, President of the European Council, and Her Excellency Ms. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. Your Excellencies, you have the floor.
Monsieur le Président de la COP28,
Mr. COP28 President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen,
des inondations qui ravagent,
there are floods that cause devastation, fires as well. Uprooted and displaced populations. No longer can any continent escape the tragedy of climate change. And however, science, knowledge, reason have led us to the diagnosis, not only the diagnosis, but we are also aware of the solution. We need to maintain the goal of 1.5 degrees, and we must, as soon as possible, rid ourselves of our dependence on fossil fuels, which puts our shared future in danger. Ladies and gentlemen, this summit is not just a conference. This summit is in reality a review of our conscience even, having a global stocktake of the Paris Agreement, and above all, acting more and acting faster. We welcome the leadership of Antonio Guterres. We also welcome the manner in which the UAE has been committed to making this COP a success. For its part, the EU is fully mobilized and committed. We would like to continue to play a driving role. The climate transition and our Green Deal development program will see us implementing packages of measures which will radically transform our economic development paradigm. We will make progress with a 30% reduction in emissions since 1990. We believe
et encourageons
in the carbon mechanism to continue making progress, and we call on others to support us.
tripler le renouvelable
We would like to triple renewables and double the energy efficiency,
des pays en développement.
and we will be supporting developing countries. We express our solidarity,
C'est une question.
and we know it is our responsibility. This is an issue of trust.
Nos engagements relatifs
This is why we will honor our commitments
à 3 milliards d'euros sont mobilisés
of 100 billion euros, 23
en termes de
million raised this year by the EU. We are committed to a just transition, and we are mobilized to support
dommages.
the Loss and Damage Fund.
C'était annoncé hier
220 million was announced yesterday by the EU as a team.
la réforme.
We also support the reform
Nous devons amener plus de
of various institutions. We would like more justice and inclusion.
Quand elle a été créée,
The World Bank
plus capitalisée qu'elle ne l'est aujourd'hui.
had 7 times the capitalization
Loyale et engagée
as compared to before, and the EU is very loyal and committed
appartient
because the earth belongs to all of us, it belongs to our children. This is not a publicity slogan. This is an existential reality. The decade that is opening up is crucial. We are fully mobilized to work alongside all of you to protect humanity. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Mr. Ursula von der Leyen, President of the European Commission. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Fellow leaders, last September at the Climate Action Summit in New York, we called for concrete action. Now in Dubai, we have to deliver. At this COP, we will set a decisive step forward to protect the most vulnerable citizens worldwide. They undergo runaway climate change. They suffer loss and damage, and we will stand by their side. This COP is about ambition, it is about targets, and it is about finance. Let me start with ambition. Global emissions must peak by 2025. We must phase out fossil fuels, and we must reduce methane emissions. But what we are calling for globally, we also have to deliver domestically. So let me report on what we do in the European Union. The European Union has peaked already. We have reduced emissions, and we are on track to overshoot our target for 2030. And we just adopted a law to drastically reduce methane emissions. Second, on targets. This COP can make history. Last spring, the European Union launched a call to triple renewables and to double energy efficiency by 2030. We were joined by some early champions like the COP presidency, President Ruto, Prime Minister Motley, and many thanks to the International Energy Agency and IRENA for your strong support. By now, our call has grown into a powerful movement. More than 110 countries have already joined. That's fantastic. So I call now on all of us to include these targets in the final COP decision, because this sends a strong message to investors and consumers alike. There is no doubt the future of energy will be clean, it will be affordable, and it will be homegrown. And finally, on finance, we must meet the 100 billion target this year. Europe consistently delivered. Last year, the European Union contributed close to $30 billion in public climate finance. And of course, the European Union will contribute to the new Loss and Damage Fund. As of today, Team Europe is contributing more than $270 million so far. We must get the fund up and running, and we must do it fast. But we all know more is needed. We need to reform the international financial system. We need a strong green bond market. And we need more carbon pricing. Ladies and gentlemen, fellow leaders, dear friends, I wish for a successful COP28. Many thanks.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I remind the Speaker to maintain 3 minutes speaking time limit. Thank you. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Mr. Samia Suluhu Hassan, President of the United Republic of Tanzania. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellency, President of COP28, Your Highnesses and Majesties, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, in Copenhagen, we committed 100 billion annually for climate action. Though far less than required, it is still not forthcoming. In Paris, we resolved to keep warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius. However, the current rate of warming is alarming. It must be said, unfulfilled commitment erode solidarity and trust and have detrimental and costly consequences for developing countries. My own country is losing 2 to 3% of its GDP due to climate change. Excellencies, the clock is ticking. This year's IPCC report cautioned that adaptation options that are visible and effective today will become constrained and less effective with increasing global warming. Putting in place the global goal on adaptation framework is a matter of urgency and not a choice. We must match our intent with our actions, and we must act now. The decision is therefore ours: adhere to science or face the consequences. On our part, the United Republic of Tanzania, despite of our minimum emission contribution, we are doing our part. At this COP28, we seek to mobilize support for increased use of clean and affordable cooking fuels and technologies across Africa, especially for women. Our call is for all of us to play our part. Excellencies, honoring our commitments and advancing the pace of climate action is a solution to this scourge. As we seek to unite, act, and deliver here in Dubai, we must deliver on climate finance. Thanks for effecting the loss and damage fund. So let us now make the fund be accessible for developing countries, predictable, and of course, transparency should be the way of operation. I thank you very much for your...
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Gitanas Nausėda, President of Lithuania. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, every year we come together to talk about the need for a change. To get the change we so desperately need, we must become the change. For many years now, Lithuania, together with the whole European Union, has been undergoing, an ambitious transformation and working on the global climate action. At first, Lithuania made a strategic decision to seek energy independence. We have built our own LNG terminal, which decreased prices and turned Lithuania into a regional gas hub. Now we are proudly sharing our expertise worldwide. Today, we see renewable energy as the ultimate means of securing full energy independence and resilience, while also helping the planet Earth. By 2030, Lithuania is going to shift from the net importer of electricity to a self-sufficient green energy producer. We plan for renewable electricity generation to grow almost sevenfold. Last year, Lithuania was the second country globally in the solar energy generation increase. My country intends to use excess renewable electricity capacities to produce green hydrogen and to address energy efficiency. The second pillar of the green transformation, through new ambitious plans. Our general aim is to achieve a 70% reduction in greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 compared to 1990 levels and to become climate neutral by 2050. The global response, too, can only be strengthened by methodical adaptation to climate change. We must all seek to be more resilient, to change our habits, and to reduce existing vulnerabilities. We also have to address the worst cases of ecocide, such as the one committed by Russia in its war of aggression against Ukraine. These actions are incompatible with international law and go against our joint efforts to stop climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, today Lithuania strongly commends the Presidency for a strong global response to the first global stocktake of the Paris Agreement. We call on all leaders to approve global 2030 renewables and energy efficiency targets. Let us work together as one team. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Emerson Dambudzo Mnangagwa, President of Zimbabwe. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Excellencies, Heads of State and Government, allow me to express my sincere gratitude to the government and people of the United Arab Emirates for successfully hosting this COP28 and for the hospitality extended to me and my delegation since our arrival here. Zimbabwe, like many other nations, continues to suffer from the negative socio-economic impacts of increased frequency of droughts, heightened intensity of tropical cyclones, and other severe weather events. No country can adapt to or mitigate these impacts alone. The ambitious emissions reductions expected from developed countries are urgent and critical to prevent a climate catastrophe. This is critical to ensure that vulnerable communities and workers in traditional industries are not left behind, and that the transition benefits all while also creating decent green jobs and promoting social and economic stability. The global economic system, the ways we produce and consume, and the resource we use to support economic growth must all undergo drastic changes in order to meaningfully implement the goals of the Paris Agreement. Zimbabwe is walking the talk on its revised, nationally determined contributions. We are offering diverse opportunities for carbon trading in the energy sector through investments in solar, wind, mini hydro, and geothermal power generation. However, the illegal economic sanctions imposed on our country are inadvertently hindering climate action by impeding progress in our quest to address environmental challenges. We reiterate our calls for the immediate and unconditional lifting of these heinous sanctions. Aspects related to sustainable methods for increased agriculture production and productivity remain essential to our ability to feed ourselves. We welcome the first global stocktake at this COP28, which should help us to continuously review, improve, and transparently disclose our climate plans. This COP28 is called upon to persist in the mobilization of resources and adopting clear strategies for achieving the promised 100 billion climate finance. Let us all fulfill our responsibilities and use this gathering as another opportunity to carve out a sustainable future for the generations to come. May history remember us as those who took bold and resolute action to preserve our planet. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Umaro Sissoko Embalo, President of Guinea-Bissau. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Senhor Dr. Sultan Al-Jaber, President de COP.
Your Excellency Sultan Ahmed Al-Jaber, President of COP28. Ladies and gentlemen, like many West African countries, Guinea-Bissau is particularly exposed to climate change. Our coastal communities face rising sea levels, and our harvests are impacted by increasingly unpredictable weather patterns, and we face a loss of biodiversity. In view of these threats, not only do we see ourselves as victims of climate change, but also active stakeholders in seeking solutions. We've undertaken significant actions in order to build resilience and our ability to adapt. This includes sustainable management strategies for our natural resources, promoting clean and renewable energy, and adapting vital infrastructure in order to withstand the impact of the climate. Conserving biodiversity is a top priority for us. Our country is blessed with a rich biodiversity in species and ecosystems. They're unique, and we are committed to protecting them for future generations. We believe that biodiversity is inextricably linked to our very resilience as a nation. Our goal is reflected in the fact that we've declared over 26% of our land surface as protected areas. This goes beyond Aichi Target 11 of the United Nations Convention on Biodiversity. Ladies and gentlemen, all of these issues show us that the climate crisis is a global threat, which requires a global response. No country can be left behind. And it's absolutely vital that developed nations meet their financial and technical assistance obligations by helping developing countries to face the challenges posed by climate change. With regard to financial resources, we would like to reiterate the need for new and additional funding for supporting adaptation and mitigation of climate change in developing countries. These resources are vital for developing countries so that we can implement the necessary measures to tackle this crisis. With regard to loss and damage caused by the climate, we call for a more robust and equitable approach. The most vulnerable communities cannot be left to fend for themselves as they tackle the devastating effects of extreme weather events and natural disasters. We would like to strengthen our commitment to the Paris Agreement and build a new climate regime based on justice and equity. Nevertheless, we need to take a meaningful stocktake of our progress up until now. Time's running out and decisive action is needed to avoid the worst possible consequences of climate change. It's in this spirit that Guinea-Bissau is committed to cooperating with all the countries attending this conference. Together, we can define the path and adopt appropriate measures for a more sustainable, resilient and fairer future for all nations and for future generations, with a view to protecting our planet. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Denis Sassou Nguesso, President of Congo. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mesdames et Messieurs,
ladies and gentlemen, heads of state and government, United Nations Secretary General, President of COP28, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to address my sincere thanks to His Highness Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of the United Arab Emirates, for the warm welcome and hospitality shown to my delegation and to me myself. I wish to take this opportunity to reiterate the Republic of Congo's steadfast commitment and determination to play an active role in the global effort to combat climate change. Before I go any further, please allow me to recall what we have achieved over the last 10 years or so at a national level and as the chair of the Congo Basin Climate Commission. Following the Paris Agreement, the vital role played by the Congo Basin tropical forests in regulating the climate was finally recognized, as it is seen as one of the last true lungs of the planet. Everyone knows what's at stake, and we have also identified the solutions. We're concerned at the need to find sustainable resources to fund forest ecosystem management and for conserving its biodiversity. This is why we launched the idea of establishing a blue fund for the Congo Basin with a view to reconciling the fight against climate change and economic development. We're also convinced of the importance of nature-based solution for achieving the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as those of the United Nations Decade for Ecosystem Restoration. This is why at COP27 in Sharm el-Sheikh, I made a formal appeal for a world forestation decade to be established in order to revert the current trend of forest destruction. It's against this backdrop that 12 years on from the first summit, last October in Brazzaville, my country hosted the second summit of the 3 tropical forest basins, Amazonia, Borneo, Mekong, Southeast Asia, and Congo. Ladies and gentlemen, we face considerable challenges which grow year after year. Some are of our own making. It is down to us to spare no efforts to conserve the planet's last lungs and these jewels of biodiversity that are our tropical forests. Thus, the duty for solidarity through requests for financial compensation following some countries' voluntary foregoing of unsustainable development projects is an issue which merits the international community's full attention. It's this effort for solidarity and equity which is the duty of all countries, because we must all work together to work for a safer planet Earth, protected from the threats and devastating effects of climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, it's not too late. It's never too late to do better. And I know, Your Excellency, President of COP28, that is your ambition. Please allow me to convey my own and the Congolese people's wishes to you. May they support you in making this global gathering in Dubai one which is epitomized by international solidarity. This is a fight we can't lose. Let's not forget that history will judge us on the way in which we've fought it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mohamed Sheikh El Ghazazwani, President of Mauritania. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
أصحاب الجلالة والفخامة والسمو.
Majesties, Excellencies,
المعالي
ladies and gentlemen,
السادة والسيدات أيها الحضور الكريم. أود ابتداء أن
at the outset, I would like to extend my thanks and gratitude to my brother, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of the UAE, for the kind hospitality. I congratulate him and all Emiratis on their National Day and on the hosting of COP28 of the UNFCCC.
فلطالما تبوأت دولة الإمارات العربية
The United Arab Emirates has always had guiding visions and leadership and has pioneered in enhancing sustainability in general and in facing environmental challenges. I also wish to congratulate His Highness Sheikh
كما أتقدم بالشكر الجزيل إلى صاحب المعالي
Sultan Al-Jaber for his presidency of the COP. I also wish to thank the Secretary General of the UN for all efforts made in the fight against climate change. Ladies and gentlemen, what we see today in environmental changes are very clear. Facing climate change today is a battle for all of us. We either all win or all lose. We all know that the only way to win this war is through concerted effort, through collective work, and that on two tracks. Firstly, to enhance adaptation and mitigation, facing adverse impact of climate change on all socio-economic fabrics of societies, especially in the developing countries. And we must work on development tracks that do not rely on carbon but promote renewables. The results on both tracks depend on international cooperation and solidarity. It is clear to all that this solidarity is still not to the required level. It is therefore essential to improve finance for environmental transformation and to provide support to developing countries without adding to their debt. Mauritania, we are one of the countries most impacted by climate change and resulting drought, desertification, and rarity of rainfall. Deserts are now extended in our country, and the various waves of drought have led to attacking our societies, our vital sectors such as water resources, agriculture, animal resources, aquatic resources, and natural ecosystems. Therefore, we are fully aware that dealing with climate change is an urgency on all levels: environmental, social, economic, and security. Efforts are made through the Great Green Wall, an important initiative, through the Sahel initiatives. And we have also adopted the Green Mediterranean Charter under the leadership of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. We have always worked on the resources, maritime and coastal resources. In addition, we have made all efforts to enhance the capacity of our people to resist and adapt to climate change. This for supporting resilience and adaptation. However, we also are working on the track of a low-carbon track through investing in new technologies. Even though we did not contribute much to global warming, we are investing in renewables, making it 34% of our national usage of energy, and we are aiming for 50%. In addition, we have a program for green hydrogen. We are confident that we will be able to achieve this objective. And we aim to reduce carbon emissions by 11%. However, in all these efforts, we still need, like most developing countries, an increase in international support to allow us to resist and adapt. I renew the call to increase support to developing countries in dealing with environmental challenges. I wish this COP all success, and I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Kassym-Jomart Tokayev, President of Kazakhstan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Kazakhstan fully supports the United Nations' urgent call for tangible actions to safeguard our environment for future generations. We were the first country in the region to have ratified the Paris Agreement and adopted a carbon neutrality strategy for 2060. The resulting new environmental code of Kazakhstan will drive comprehensive adaptation of green technology in practically every sector of our national economy. There is extraordinary potential for wind and solar power in my country, as well as for green hydrogen. We will continue to work closely with our partners to unlock it. As the world's leading exporter of uranium, providing 43% of global supply, Kazakhstan plays a crucial role in carbon-free electricity generation on a global scale. Indeed, as the world decarbonizes in the coming decades, critical minerals, including rare earth metals, will become indispensable. Kazakhstan is poised to become a major supplier of these transition minerals. We are also actively supporting private green initiatives. For example, Kazakhstan-based the Plastic Association works on plastic waste-free projects contributing to eco-friendly solutions. Cutting methane emissions is the fastest opportunity we have to immediately slow the rate of global warming. That's why I am pleased to announce today that Kazakhstan has decided to join the Global Methane Pledge. At the same time, we are eager to tackle the enormous challenge of coal in our region by implementing our region's first ever Just Energy Transition Partnership in Kazakhstan. For both of these to succeed, we look to our friends and partners for their concrete support. More widely, we look to the international community to scale up its commitment to greater meaningful climate finance. But finance is just the first hurdle. Even if we successfully limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees by 2050, Central Asian countries will still experience up to 2.5 degrees of temperature rise. So adaptation is both inevitable and imperative. Therefore, we urge that more resources be allocated to support the International Fund for Saving the Aral Sea. Moreover, we are pleased, together with France, to co-chair the first One Water Summit on the margins of the next United Nations General Assembly. To build a momentum on climate action in Central Asia, we decided to convene a regional climate summit in Kazakhstan in 2026 under the United Nations auspices. The climate emergency is a global crisis that requires a global response. Kazakhstan firmly believes that only through collective action and cooperation we can resolve the climate crisis. And finally, I extend my warmest congratulations to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan for successful COP28 presidency. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Santiago Peña Palacios, President of Paraguay. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencias,
Excellencies, it's an honor for me to take part in COP28. Different cultures and traditions are meeting here to define how we can address a common challenge together, the adverse effects of climate change. This shows that we can hold a dialogue between different traditions. We do hope that Dubai will be a landmark in measures to repair damage to the earth and sea caused by human hands. Protection measures for the environment must be robust and fair, and they must above all respect the guiding principles of the Paris Agreement, such as common but differentiated responsibilities, bearing in mind the different capacities and conditions of states, particularly those of us that need to strengthen our development. In my country, Paraguay, all energy is clean and renewable. Yes, you heard that right. All energy, 100% is clean and renewable. We have unique biodiversity and the potential to be a carbon sink. 44% of our land surface is forest, 15% of our land surface is protected forest. We are the 6th largest producer of soybean, and 94% of the land surface sown with it has not been deforested. We are one of the 10 leading exporters of beef, and it's of high quality thanks that we strictly comply with health protocols and natural grazing for our cattle. Our CO2 emissions are the lowest in the Latin American region, just 0.1% of global emissions. The 4th National Communication on Climate Change shows a 44% drop in emissions from farming and forestry, and a 14% drop in methane emissions in farming and livestock rearing compared to 2010. We've taken the first steps to join the voluntary carbon market. Paraguay is a key player in food and energy security. We have high environmental awareness, and we've taken measures to be considered an example. It's time that the world was aware of this. I urge the Convention to simplify processes and remove barriers to access to climate funding. The planet is our common home, and that's why we hope that everybody can take part in the COP. And this is why we propose that the Republic of China, Taiwan, be included in this process. Lastly, President, I would like to underscore the importance of promoting a fairer approach, and one which doesn't impose penalties when it comes to tackling climate challenges. Developing countries cannot postpone their development because of unilateral, almost arbitrary demands. Dear friends, Paraguay defends a green, fraternal and prosperous planet in which we all meet our commitments to rebuild trust in the multilateral system. I'm firmly convinced that our joint efforts of leaving a decent legacy for future generations will prevail. We will be wise enough to leave a better world than the one we found. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Abdulatif Jamal Rashid, President of Iraq. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of God, the most merciful, the most compassionate, Your Royal Highnesses, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, peace be upon you. I would like to convey the best greetings from Iraq, the historical Mesopotamia, the cradle of human civilizations that has introduced knowledge, science, and law. Iraq was the first territory in which laws have been enacted based on its natural heritage taken from the rivers of Tigris and Euphrates. Both rivers are under threats of drought on the back of a number of impacts, including climate change. Iraq is a low emitter of global greenhouse gases. However, it is one of the most vulnerable countries of the world towards climate change, particularly when it comes to water and agriculture. Iraq faces serious water crises indeed. Because of the reduction of our water resources at source and the impact of climate change and the threats of traditional agriculture techniques, this have become a threat to our civilization, our present and our future. The drought of the marshes in the south of Iraq, which is already under the global heritage list, is the best example. The extreme weather events in Iraq, including the record level temperatures, low precipitations, have led to larger droughts, desertification, land degradation, and sand storms that have led to economic challenges that resulted in a larger level of poverty and internal displacement as well as external migration. The conflict over water is not new. And the status of Iraq as a downstream country is not scarce. Therefore, we would urge you to include the just distribution of water as part of your discussions when it comes to the loss and damages of the downstream countries in order to ensure their water security. I would like here to refer to our predecessors in Mesopotamia who developed solutions for this problem 4,500 years ago by concluding the first agreement for sharing water resources through negotiations. And here we are to negotiate at a global level a number of agreements, including the agreement on the protection of the sustainable use of transboundary water, which should be activated as promptly as possible, despite the fact that Iraq has only joined the UNFCCC in 2009 because of the neglect by the previous regime of environment. We are determined to increase our NDCs so as to increase our resilience towards climate change, mapping up our future plans for adaptation and mitigation and realization of Sustainable Development 2030. Therefore, the second national report of climate change and the biannual updated report on greenhouse gas emissions in Iraq are under preparation, the matter which reflects Iraq's commitment to its climate commitments. Based on the above, the Iraqi government has taken prompt actions to implement renewable and clean energy projects with a view to reducing GHG emissions that emanate from oil reduction, reaching net zero by 2030 through upgrading the capacities of the electricity grid We are sure that the Dubai COP28 will come up with balanced and comprehensive as well as equitable outcomes when it comes to global assessment, just transition, the loss and damage fund, as well as the global adaptation goal based on the common but differentiated responsibility and as based on the national specificities and capabilities with a view to realizing sustainable and renewable clean energy. As we in the region of the Gulf, we are in the front lines of facing climate change consequences. The rising temperatures, particularly on the shorelines of the Gulf, will go beyond the 2%, the 2 Celsius limit. We are already suffering from rising temperatures, sandstorms, as well as water scarcities. And it has to be noted that these changes are no respecter of borders. Therefore, each one of our countries, when it comes to adaptation or mitigation, will have a positive impact on the other countries. We have no other choice but to pool our efforts to collectively face the risks of climate change with all our might. Out of this rostrum, we call upon the neighboring countries in the Gulf to exert collective efforts as a single unilateral negotiating bloc to take our unified position to ensure the climate future of us all and to realize a regional gathering for the riparian countries, the 8 riparian countries of the Gulf, to address the serious challenges of the climate change. We therefore, in conclusion, we condemn the aggressive assault against Gaza. We call upon the international community to stand firm against this assault. We reaffirm the Iraqi position for the Palestinian people to self-determination. And thank you very much, and peace be upon you all.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Alexander Vučić, President of Serbia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues. First and foremost, allow me to extend a heartfelt congratulations to the United Arab Emirates government for bringing the world together at a critical moment for global transformative climate action, despite the challenges we all face today worldwide. As we once again gather to face the greatest challenge of our time, we are at a critical time in the fight against climate change. Catastrophic global warming and ongoing extreme weather events are casting a dangerous shadow over our collective future. Today I stand before you not only as the representative of the Republic of Serbia, but also as a global citizen advocating for global well-being. Across the border of the Republic of Serbia, the echoes of climate change resonate disturbingly loudly. Our country is at the forefront, struggling with alarmingly high average temperatures above the global average, since average temperature in Serbia already increased by 1.8 degrees Celsius, and in summer it is as high as 2.6 degrees Celsius. At the same time, climate projections indicate that if we continue business as usual, by the end of the century we can expect an increase in the average temperature up to 5.8 degrees Celsius, a cataclysm of a kind that threatens our economic and social fabric. This year will most certainly take the infamous title of the warmest ever recorded, not just globally, but in our country as well. Aside from warmest months ever recording being July, August, September, and October, we witnessed for the first time 2 tropical nights with temperatures over 20 degrees Celsius during the month of October, which is unheard of in Serbia. In addition, we are still calculating the damage drought made to our economy last year, while on the other hand, severe storms devastated our cities, causing a vast damage as well. We must stand united against climate change, and we must act now.
We will continue to contribute to the global fight against climate change by improving our national system for mitigation and adaptation in line with our national circumstances and with the support of our development partners. In steadfast response to this existential threat, I'm honored to announce the government of the Republic of Serbia's unwavering commitment. In June of this year, we charted a transformative course with the adoption of our low-carbon development strategy, which served as the basis for revised national determined contribution that raised the ambition of our initial NDC by more than 3 times. Long-term requirements of the Paris Agreement as well as the EU accession process are the basis for long-term vision of the strategy that by 2050 Serbia will be a low-carbon society with a competitive and resource-efficient economy which provides to citizens new, green jobs and quality life in a climate-resilient society. With this in mind and guided by science, we also developed our climate change adaptation program, which is to be adopted in the forthcoming period. Adaptation program will provide climate risk and vulnerability assessment and propose medium and long-term adaptation policies and measures in the most vulnerable sectors such as agriculture, infrastructure, forestry and human health. Recognizing that the fight against climate change transcends borders, we issue a solemn call to action for all. While our national progress is unstoppable, it is part of a larger puzzle. The Republic of Serbia is ready to play its role in the global orchestra against climate change. We call upon the international community, especially our developed counterparts, to honor their commitments to financial and technical assistance. Let this be a call for armed cooperation and shared responsibility, a call for the clarity of saying one against the pessimistic scenarios. Although I have to add something, which is my personal opinion, and once again, many thanks to Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of the United Arab Emirates, for his great hospitality. Just would like to say that we all gathered here because of a terribly difficult problem that we are facing with, which is climate change. But how are we going to resolve this issue if we are not able to resolve all the geopolitical problems we are facing with today? There are many wars throughout the world that we haven't been able to stop in the recent period. And moreover, I'm afraid that we won't be able to do so. If we were not capable of delivering results in this, how we can be so sure, how we can be so certain that we'll deliver the very best results, the very proper results on climate change issues as well. And just to add to that, I believe that bringing us all back to the real principles of the Organization of the United Nations that we established after the Second World War, because we have to act in accordance, in adherence with rules, regulations that were accepted by most of the members of the international community, by most or by all the states of international community. It has to happen, otherwise we'll always face arbitration, different approaches, and will never deliver better results even on this. You cannot have different approaches towards territorial integrities of some countries, and we as Serbia know this better than anyone else dare to say. And on the other hand, I heard today a phrase, as we come together, as we come together, as we come together. Let us find a common denominator which will find a way, find a path to resolve firstly the biggest geopolitical issues and then to tackle in a very proper way an issue of climate changes which is becoming one of the most important. Thank you once again.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Wawel John Charles Rankalawan, President of Seychelles. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Your Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of COP28 Dr. Sultan Al Jaber, Heads of State and Government, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to express my gratitude to His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan and to the people of the United Arab Emirates for the warm welcome and hospitality extended to my delegation and myself. I take this opportunity to congratulate you on the organization of COP28 and wish you prosperity as you celebrate your 52nd National Day. The collective efforts to foster cooperation in response to the most pressing issue of our time are indeed commendable. I am honored, therefore, to address this esteemed assembly on behalf of the people of Seychelles. In our shared pursuit of a sustainable future, the urgency of our deliberations here in Dubai cannot be overstated. As parties to the convention, we committed to deliver on commitments such as the USD 100 billion promise, scaling up adaptation finance, new collective quantified goal on finance, and most recently, the Loss and Damage Fund. We are yet at another COP, and I am disheartened to state that most of these commitments are yet to be fulfilled, despite the urgency required to address the climate crisis. As leaders, I call for your unwavering shift in political will that will translate into concrete actions so as to confine global temperature rise within the critical threshold of 1.5 degrees Celsius. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, small island developing states are on the front line of climate change, facing rising sea levels, coastal erosion, increased frequency of extreme weather events, and the loss of vital ecosystems. Whether we are high income, low income, or among the least developed countries, our specificities are the same, and what the industrialized nations emit have a direct impact on our coastlines and livelihoods. We are simply islands floating in the ocean, and therefore we must be treated as a unique and separate category when it comes to assisting us. I call on SEEDS to unite and support each other. As I speak, my country is experiencing devastating impacts of climate change, specifically damage to the coastline and critical coastal infrastructure caused by higher tides, frequent storm surges, and heavy rainfall. Coupled with other impacts, these are endangering the livelihoods of my people and our islands. A recent comprehensive survey only on the main populated granitic islands of the Seychelles, conducted by our technical teams, estimated that we need over 50 million USD for road infrastructure works and other measures to mitigate coastal erosion. Our updated NDC highlighted a further 600 million USD will be required over the next 10 years for both mitigation and adaptation sector, translating to 5% of GDP annually or 10% of the annual budget. If we are to add the disaster happening to our Coralline Islands, that figure could be doubled, let alone tripled. Like many SEEDs, 90% of the country's infrastructure and human activities occur along its low-lying coastal areas and are thus vulnerable to the impacts of climate change. The current trajectory means Seychelles' economy stands to be severely undermined, whereby forcing us to divert much-needed finance to environment protection instead of investing in education, health, sports, agriculture, food security, modernization, and giving our people a better standard of living. Ladies and gentlemen, we made history last year by establishing the Loss and Damage Fund, and this year we made history again by operationalizing the Loss and Damage Fund on the first day of this COP, with UAE and Germany pledging $100 million each. It is absolutely vital that this fund is equitable and genuinely helpful to countries that are experiencing climate-related disasters. It should be inclusive enough without limiting access to finance, especially for high-income SIDS like Seychelles. We need less complicated and complex financial mechanisms that will allow us SIDS to easily access those financial opportunities. Again, my call is to consider our special circumstances as islands in the middle of oceans. Seychelles, for example, is known to be outside the cyclone belt, and we are considered high income. But when a cyclone hits neighboring Madagascar or Mauritius, the effects of adverse weather conditions affect all our islands, including our capital. In April 2016, Fantala, a Category 5 cyclone, hit one of our islands 3 times, destroying everything, including the communication network and homes of workers, creating 2 new islands in the lagoon. The resulting tsunami of the earthquake of December 2004 in Sumatra, Indonesia, thousands of miles away, traveled all the way to Seychelles, destroying human life and coastal infrastructure. My point is very simple. Don't categorize islands into economic bands, but treat all islands in the same manner and allow all of us to have access to the Loss and Damage Fund. We all lose from the damage you cause, yet we clean up our emissions and help mop up those of industrialized nations. The current criteria used to access concessionary finance puts SIDS, such as Seychelles, at a severe disadvantage under the current labels. There is an urgent need to reform the multilateral international financial institutions to address the restrictive conditionalities. This reform is necessary to help fund climate change projects. In other words, finance needs to be more readily available, accessible, and affordable to support these projects. As the current chair of SIDSDOC and the African Island States Climate Commission, my plea to COP28 is for the developed world and the multilateral international financial institutions to have a fresh look at the SIDS, which in fact are large oceanic states, and to take into account our respective particularities. Despite contributing very little to global emissions, SIDS like Seychelles bear the brunt of the climate crisis. We are actively engaged in decarbonizing our energy sector, including transitioning to green mobility. Additionally, as a dedicated environment champion, Seychelles remains committed to safeguard its terrestrial and marine ecosystems. When I signed the United Nations High Seas Treaty, or the BBNJ, earlier this year at the UN, I smiled to myself because, in a sense, Seychelles had already ratified it, since we are already protecting 32% of the ocean under our care. We are protecting nearly 100% of our seagrass and that of our mangroves, and another 50% of our scarce landmass. Recent sightings of blue whales in our waters after more than 60 years' absence serves as evidence that our conservation efforts are creating a safe haven for marine life. The message is loud and clear. Seychelles is a committed partner that can be trusted. We believe in what we preach, and we walk the talk. The evidence is there. However, we cannot do it alone. We need the financial support of the whole world to help the 100,000 people on these islands in the middle of the Indian Ocean. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the metaphorical hourglass is dwindling. COP28 presents a pivotal call to action to build climate resilience before the last grain of sand slips away. In unity and determination, let us seize this moment to reverse our course and forge a sustainable and resilient future for generations to come. Let's not leave anyone behind. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. May I remind the Speaker to maintain 3 minutes speaking time limit? Thank you. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, President of Turkey. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Saygıdeğer devlet ve hükümet başkanları,
distinguished heads of state and government, Honorable Secretary General, on behalf of myself and my nation, I greet you all with most heartfelt feelings. I wish the World Climate Action Summit to be beneficial to all humanity. I would like to thank the Emirates authorities for their warm hospitality. Our world is now confronted with the tragic consequences of the massacres in Gaza following the COVID-19 pandemic and the Ukraine-Russia war. Turkey has stood by peace during all these crises and works towards finding solutions on the basis of justice and equity. And we approach to the issue of climate change from the same perspective. When it comes to combating climate change, even though our historical responsibility of the global greenhouse gas emissions is less than 1%, we're taking significant steps with our own means. We plan to reach the net zero emission target by the year 2053. We have doubled our emission reduction target for the year 2030. Within this scope, by the end of this year, we expect to have mitigated 66.6 million ton equivalent carbon dioxide. The share of renewables in our installed power generation capacity has been increased up to 55%. With this rate, Turkey currently ranks the 5th in Europe and the 12th in the world in terms of installed renewable energy capacity. As regards geothermal energy capacity, we are ranking the 1st in Europe and the 4th in the world. And when it comes to hydropower, Turkey ranks the 2nd in Europe and 9th in the world. We have also started off implementing our hydrogen technologies strategy. Furthermore, in the context of our net zero emission target, we have prepared our roadmaps for decarbonization of certain sectors such as cement, steel, and fertilizers. We envisage to increase the share of renewable energy up to 69% in 2053. Thanks to the Zero Waste project initiated under the auspices of my spouse, Mrs. Emine Erdoğan, we will increase the rate of recycled waste up to 60% by the year 2035. As you all know, the cost of all these efforts is quite high. Because of this, it is of central importance that we access climate finance resources and also means of technology transfer in a more equitable manner. Despite the earthquake disaster of 6th of February, we have not given up on our targets, neither on the economy nor on combating climate change. Thanks to God, we are rapidly healing the wounds of the earthquake that affected 14 million people and 11 cities in our country. Now, as we reconstruct our cities, our top priority is to protect the environment and to build climate-friendly and environment-friendly structures. Dear friends, while expressing here our views on climate crisis, it is impossible not to touch upon the humanitarian crisis taking place in the Palestinian territories close to us. As a result of the Israeli aggression, killing of more than 16,000 innocent Palestinian civilians, mostly children and women, this cannot be justified under any circumstances. The incidents taking place in Gaza is a humanitarian crime, a war crime, and the perpetrators must be held accountable before international law. With the recent developments, once again, we realize the importance of establishing an independent, sovereign state of Palestine, having territorial integrity based on the 1967 borders and with East Jerusalem as its capital. We stand ready as Turkey to take any responsibility in this process. I would like to emphasize once again our two mottos. The world is bigger than five, and a more just world is possible. Before concluding my remarks with these thoughts, I would like to thank particularly my distinguished brothers, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, the President of UAE, and His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum, the Vice President of UAE and the ruler of Dubai, and I also thank everyone contributing to the organizing of the summit. In January, we will organize the 60th session of the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change in Istanbul. Moreover, we have declared our candidacy to host COP31, the 31st conference of the parties to the UN Framework Agreement on Climate Change, to be held in 2026. My distinguished friends, I have no doubt that you will provide the necessary support to us for this candidacy. I finally salute you all with respect and best of my feelings. Take care.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Mr. Zuzana Kaputova, President of Slovakia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the findings of the global stocktake are clear. Humanity is marching towards the precipice. How many more climate fora do we need to avoid a free fall into it? The number of weather-related disasters almost tripled in the past 4 decades. Every 5 seconds, someone dies a premature death because of pollution. Our inaction will soon make it every 4 seconds. 88% of the existing disease as a result of climate change occurs in children under 5 years of age. How much more do we want to harm the future generations? Excellencies, decisions which can avoid the current deadly course are ours to take. The solutions are right in front of us, feasible, effective, and low-cost options are already available to mitigate the climate crisis impact. We have the technologies, resources, and skills needed. Let's use them. Our efforts must be ambitious, collective, and universal. The science is clear. Our emissions must peak before 2025. Slovakia will do its fair share. Our emissions have peaked already. By 2030, they will be 55% less than in 1990. In the next 7 years, we will invest 5% of our GDP from public sources to decarbonize our economy and society. At the end of this year, Slovakia is stopping the use of coal as a source of electricity. In 3 years, we will phase it out from heat generation. By 2030, we plan to reach 29% of renewables share in our electricity production. 85% of our electricity is already made with zero emissions. We commit to increase this to 90% by 2025. Slovakia is endorsing the Global Renewables and Energy Efficiency Pledge. Since 2015, Slovakia's green finance has grown almost fivefold, including in greener ODA and our contribution to Green Climate Fund. The Loss and Damage Fund should help support the most vulnerable, and all big emitters and economies must step in and step up. Excellencies, let's make this COP the first one, where the benefits of our concrete commitments exceed our excuses and the carbon footprint of the planes we arrived on. Thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is now my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Felipe Jacinto Nyusi, President of Mozambique. Your Excellency, your floor.
Mr. President, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is with a great honor and pleasure that on behalf of the people and government of Mozambique, I take the floor at this opening session of COP28, intended to review, to take stock of what we have done over the last year so that together we can guide our actions on climate action. Mozambique, despite contributing less than 0.5% of emission of greenhouse gases, is among 10 countries that are suffering from the adverse impact of climate change. The bad weather registered from January to March, including Cyclone Fred, the most lasting one, caused more than 306 people and affected more than 1.3 million people, and that it has destroyed a number of economic and social and productive infrastructures. In this regard, we support innovative financing initiatives such as the conversion of debt for climate action and access to concessional funding for developing countries. Mozambique has joined the African initiative of carbon market, and we have started the development of a plan for activating the carbon market plan. We are in contact, we're engaging a number of countries to sign an agreement for selling considering the potential of Mozambique of generating carbon credits, particularly on the forest, agriculture, renewable energies, as well as on blue economy. We have adopted a national regulation for projects of REDD+, and in 2018 we're the first country to receive benefits with a certification of 1.9 million carbon credits in terms of use of renewable energy for power generation. In Mozambique, about 70% of energy that is generated is from hydro sources, and 14% from natural gas and 16% from other sources, mainly solar power. Since this is the first COP after the Paris Agreement to take stock of the situation in terms of mitigation of climate change, we take this opportunity to urge parties to honor the commitments taken and support those countries that contribute less for greenhouse gases but do not have enough domestic resources to fund climate action. We urge different governmental and non-governmental institutions to increase funding for research and technological innovation action, because with scientific expertise, communities can know how best to adapt to climate change. Excellencies, postponing climate action today, it's a clear investment in destruction in an irreversible manner for our planet and humanity. I conclude by inviting private and public partners to join us in making the initiative for sustainable and integrated management of the Miombo flood viable, which was launched under the Maputo Declaration. Miombo, with its knowledge resources, because climate change are one of the threat of the forest, the Miombo forest. We are now planning an international conference here to discuss on the Miombo forest so that we can give our contribution for carbon sequestration. Thank you very much for your attention, ladies and gentlemen.
But thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Rashad Mohammed Ali Al-Alimi, President of Yemen. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim.
In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful, Your Excellency, Sheikh Hamad bin Zayed, the President of UAE, Majesties, Presidents of governments and states, Mr. Antonio Guterres, Secretary General of the UN, President of COP, ladies and gentlemen. At the outset, I wish to express my appreciation and congratulations to our brothers in the UAE for organizing and hosting this high-profile global summit. I wish also to thank the UN and the Secretary General for their efforts in cooperating with the parties in order to reach this new level in our efforts to counter threats to the present and future of the planet. Ladies and gentlemen, a year ago, we met in Egypt in order to achieve the same goals, which every time put us in front of our commitments and responsibility in order to protect the planet, especially in view of the threats of climate change and the never ceasing temperature. We meet today in Dubai, in the UAE, a city which early enough was capable to transform to a green economy thanks to late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, may he rest in peace. We hope to see genuine progress in our collective efforts to reduce emissions and to build adaptation capacity and reinforce climate change programs, particularly in favor of least developed countries which incur losses year in and year out. Ladies and gentlemen, last month we participated in the regions of Mahara, another region in Yemen, difficult climate events in the context of war launched by Houthi militias. The cyclone Tig, which hit hard our country, affected countries and isolated them from the rest of Yemen, hitting hard on infrastructure. Also, floods destroyed lands, agricultural lands, and led several people to be isolated of their homes, ending up to be part of the millions of displaced people due to the war launched by the Houthis over the last 10 years. Ladies and gentlemen, the Yemenis are facing security, economic, and political challenges that are serious due to the ongoing war, as the Houthis refuse ending up to the hostilities and putting an end to the worst humanitarian crisis resources globally, which makes our efforts to counter climate change is very complicated, are very complicated. The need to electricity in view of the war prompted us to consider changing to solar energy, and we should be to express our pride in the support that we have received from the UAE in supporting renewable energy programs, which we have started in Yemen with 120 megawatt capacity. These programs will be ratcheted up to reach 1,000 megawatt. We plan also to plant thousands of trees as part of Mohammed bin Salman's program for the Green Middle East. I wish you success, all of you, in your endeavors to reach and realize our common goals, and thank you very much.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Dr. Hage Geoffrey Geingob, President of Namibia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you. Your Excellency, President, United Arab Emirates, allow me to extend sincere gratitude to His Highness, President Naham, and the people of the UAE for graciously hosting the 28th United Nations Conference of Parties. I wish to commend the visionary efforts of the UAE government in championing sustainable development and environmental protection. The sixth report of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Changes identifies Namibia as one of the most vulnerable nations in sub-Saharan Africa, with rising temperatures, increased evaporation, and rainfall variability posing significant challenges. Therefore, for the drought-prone country like Namibia, climate change stands as a formidable obstacle to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The estimated cost for implementing our nationally determined contributions is $15 billion by 2030, with 90% of it contingent on financial support from the multilateral financing windows under UNFCCC. Namibia has established a world-class blended finance infrastructure fund that is ready to receive climate financing today to facilitate necessary action we need. Our national adaptation plan is enhanced by the announcement Namibia made 3 years ago during the 75th General Assembly, boldly signaling our intention to leverage innovative financial tools to mobilize sustainable climate financing to combat climate change. 1 year later in Glasgow, Scotland, on the margins of COP26, we announced the development of large-scale green hydrogen projects that will provide the world with the clean molecules needed to decarbonize hard-to-abate sectors. Today, as part of our efforts to build green industrial clusters in Namibia, we are developing more than 9 hydrogen projects. To do so successfully, we must deploy more than $20 billion to give future generations a fighting chance against a warming climate. Ladies and gentlemen, as we enter the inauguration global stock take, Namibia emphasizes that the process should help us to identify gaps in financial support needed, the support that was provided so far since the adoption of the Paris Conference in 2015 to date. Finally, COVID-19 COP28 provides a platform for nations to strengthen partnerships, share knowledge, and collectively tackle the global challenges posed by climate change. Solidarity, equity, and cooperation are essential if we are serious about fixing climate finance and placing livelihood at the heart of climate action. Let us seize this moment at COP28 to avert a climate catastrophe. Let us seize this moment by taking bold decisions that will protect our planet for generations to come. No more conferences, but only implementation. I thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Nikos Christodoulides, President of Cyprus. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, distinguished guests, I would like to take this opportunity to express my deepest appreciation to the government of the United Arab Emirates for hosting and steering the work of COP28, and indeed for its leadership on climate change. There is an evident reason why the world's attention is focused on our deliberations here in Dubai. The gravity of the situation regarding climate change calls for global action, for swift and resolute decisions, but also leveling up our ambition for the future of our planet and for the future generations. It is a global challenge that recognizes no borders and can only be addressed through multilateral cooperation. Indeed, the latest IPCC report of March 2023 details the magnitude of changes in the climate system caused by anthropogenic emissions that is unprecedented in the history of humanity. Human-caused climate change is increasing both the frequency of the magnitude of extreme weather events in the whole world, devastates our ecosystems and livelihoods, as well as, by consequence, our societies and economies. For some part of the world, that is already an existential threat. Excellencies, Cyprus, situated at the heart of the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East, an area that is highly vulnerable to the impact of climate change, is experiencing these effects at higher levels than the global averages. During the last few years, we have witnessed higher frequency and extent of huge wildfires, droughts, and floods, as well as prolonged periods of extreme heat waves. These phenomena have destroyed large parts of our forests, as well as the unique ecosystems in our region, and have had a devastating impact on livelihoods, demanding urgent national and regional responses. Dear friends, deep emission cuts are necessary across countries and all sectors of activity within our societies. It is clear that we must act urgently, decisively, and collectively. One example of collective regional action is the Eastern Mediterranean and the Middle East Climate Change Initiative, initiated by Cyprus in 2019, in the context of recognizing the need for regional synergies to combat and mitigate the impact of climate change in our region, in full line with the goals of the Paris Agreement. Last year, in Sharm el-Sheikh, the heads of states and governments of countries belonging to the initiative adopted a political declaration as well as the regional action plan. Currently, we are in the process of moving forward with its implementation. We initiated a dialogue and stock-taking with the countries that are part of this initiative to jointly undertake and move forward specific projects and actions to promote climate change mitigation and adaptation. Furthermore, firmly believing in the necessity for regional and transnational cooperation, the Republic of Cyprus will host in 2024 the first Commonwealth the first Commonwealth ministerial meeting on the sustainable use of the ocean. The meeting is to establish the principles, priorities, and actions that will govern the future Commonwealth Ocean Declaration. Your Excellencies, global ambition must also substantially increase in line with the Paris Agreement to keep the 1.5 degrees Celsius objective within reach. With this in mind, we need to successfully conclude the first global stocktake with a determined and forward-looking outcome, crystallizing pathways and opportunities for a climate resilient and sustainable development. Ladies and gentlemen, in closing, I would like to acknowledge the importance of youth, of the generations that will come after us. These voices are speaking up loud and clear and expect us to deliver to them a future of hope. Let us heed that call, let us walk the path to climate neutrality, and let us come together to build resilient, sustainable, and green businesses, communities, and countries of the future. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Vehegin Kuchturan, President of Armenia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to congratulate the President of the United Arab Emirates, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, and the government of United Arab Emirates on excellent organization of the COP28. Climate change remains a topping global issue, and the COP session reminds us of the need to take a holistic approach to it for a greener, more sustainable, peaceful, and healthier future. In 2015, we made a historic step by adopting the Paris Agreement. However, as the latest report of the International Panel on Climate Change highlights, we are way off track from pathways for keeping its goals. The reasons for this numerous, including with the continued renaissance and fossil fuel-based economies at its core. It is clear that we cannot continue down the path of excessive and insensible exploration of hydrocarbons for energy production. Pacing down the demand for supply of fossil fuels is an imperative. We need to build energy systems which are more carbon neutral and less fossil fuel related to meet our ambitions for climate change mitigation. The solutions are there. We need to accelerate science and build on the positive developments of the last decade by doubling and tripling the use of renewable energy sources. For that end, we need sufficient climate financing, with the loss and damage fund being a cornerstone. Dear attendees, as a mountains developing country, Armenia is facing many challenges in this area. World Bank projections for Armenia indicate warming at levels significantly above the global average of up to 4.7 degrees by the 2090s. Under the highest emissions pathway, this places Armenia among the most vulnerable countries in the Eastern European and Central Asia. Mr. President, despite the serious humanitarian challenges and external security threats, Armenia takes proactive measures to fulfill our Paris Agreement promises, employing both conventional and innovative solutions that involve all segments of the society. In 2021, Armenia declared its post-2020 climate actions, an NDC with a 14% greenhouse reduction target by 2030. Recently, we developed long-term low-emission development strategies to guide us toward carbon neutrality. Our climate ambitions are largely increased in the carbon neutral energy transition. By 2030, we aim for a 15% of share of solar energy in our total energy production. Armenia firmly believes that the attainment of our climate commitments can be achieved with long-term and sustainable use of nuclear power as a carbon-neutral source of energy, and we appreciate of efforts of the International Atomic Energy Agency in this regard. Armenia is determined to achieving its ambition targets and securing a clean and sustainable future for the next generation. We stand ready to further contribute to global effort to this end. Thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Dr. Muhammad Ifan Ali, President of Guyana. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, I have not come here to restate the climate challenges the world faces. Instead, I want to urge us all to reflect on how we can meet these challenges. Because too often, the climate debate is dominated by some who are stuck in the past, who deploy outrage and anger as their only tools. But the landscape has shifted. If we want to achieve a just, affordable transition to meet the goals of the Paris Agreement, we need everybody at the table who has a solution to propose. And we need to recognize that climate action cannot be to the detriment of the world's developing countries and poorest people. COP28 will not achieve the desired objectives of definitively putting our planet on a net zero trajectory if we continue to address this matter in a doctrinarian way, ignoring the current realities. Given the growth in demand for energy, a significant part of that demand will come from the many in the developing world who continue to live in energy poverty. It is also a fact that renewables will not meet the growth of demand in the near future. If the debate of COP28 is framed by two camps, one calling for no cuts in fossil fuel production, including the most polluting form such as coal, and the other saying that the only solution to net zero is an end to fossil fuel production, then we'll fail once again to achieve a viable outcome and not to give our world the energy it needs to grow and prosper. I believe that net zero by 2050 as a target can only be achieved by a combination of measures that include a reduction in the fossil fuel production and the removal of large polluters out of the supply chain. And we reiterate our call for the removal of subsidies, incentivizing the introduction of renewables at scale, addressing the demand for energy, upscaling technology, for example, carbon capture and storage, and reduction in deforestation and land degradation through incentives and incentivizing the protection and sustainable management of forests. Against this reality, Guyana underscores the need for us to collectively reset global relationships and imbue them with enhanced trust and solidarity. Only in doing so, we can aspire to confront the most pressing challenges of our era: climate change, conflicts, the energy and food crisis, and achieving sustainable development. That means three priorities for the COP: agreeing a just, orderly, and affordable transition away from excessive fossil fuel use, ensuring at scale and accessible climate finance for a developing world that is of a scale that matches what needs to be done, and agreeing on action at scale to maintain tropical forests and advance sustainable land use. Specifically, on tropical forests, the COP must finally turn the promise of climate action into reality. Halting and reversing forest loss globally by 2030 is potentially 1/3 of the available solution to keep 1.5 degrees in reach. Finance is key, and Guyana is pleased to co-chair the Carbon Markets Working Group of the Forest and Climate Leadership Partnership, consisting of 30 countries. Along with our partners in the FCLP, we'll be working to build high-quality carbon markets so that forest communities and countries can prosper while keeping nature intact. In Guyana, back in 2008, we were the first developing country to produce a low-carbon development strategy, or LCDS. We maintain one of the world's most intact tropical forests, have one of the world's lowest deforestation rates, and store more than 19.5 gigatons of carbon dioxide, equivalent in that forest. We are a carbon net positive country and aim to stay there. We accept the responsibilities that come with being a new oil producer. Our economy will grow more than threefold while keeping energy-related emissions flat. We are building an ecosystem service economy with forest carbon markets generating 4.5% of government income this year alone. Forest carbon markets are also creating revenue for more than 500 LCDS projects across indigenous and other communities, and funding one of Guyana's biggest ever investment in adaptation. So to conclude, Guyana will continue to be a world leader in aligning food security, energy security, and climate security. We stand in solidarity with everyone who is working to create a better future, especially in developing countries. And we will always put practical solutions before abstract theories so that we can play our part in finally bringing climate stability within reach. I thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Emmanuel Macron, President of France. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Thank you, heads of state, government, ministers, ambassadors. I want to thank you, Mr. President Mohammed bin Zayed, for the warm welcome to this conference and the excellent organization. All protocols observed. I'll try not to repeat many of the things that have already been said, even though that is always difficult, especially given in light of the opening statement. But I just want to highlight some action points regarding where we are and what we need to do in the months to come, years to come. It seems the top priority for the developed countries must phase out fossil fuels. So we have the Paris Accords, which set the route. France is committed to that path. We have respected it over the years, and we know that to respect it up to before 2030, and this is true for many other countries, for us, we must multiply by 2.5 our effort. In these last 5 efforts, we've already doubled our efforts, but nothing should let us fall short of that ambition. And I should say that this isn't just words, but France does have a plan. We have presented its finance specifically to phase out fossil fuels and reduce emissions. Europe is fully committed to that strategy in 2035. The high percentage of cars produced in France and Europe will function without oil. We are building a housing strategy, reducing massively maritime and air emissions. In particular, I welcome the excellent agreement reached with the maritime industry of our countries a few moments ago, which will allow us to reduce emissions greatly by 2030 and reach carbon neutrality by 2050 in that industry. Also have a comprehensive strategy on nuclear, renewables and hydrogen that will allow us to achieve that goal. Starting 2030, fossil fuels will be a minority in the French energy mix for the first time since the Industrial Revolution, and we'll have to turn the page by 2040, 2045 on gas and oil. The biggest emitters must now enter this spirit of environmental planning and transparency. In that respect, G7 has a major part to play, as does China, which now is the second biggest emitter in history, and the status has almost changed. The private actors in our countries must also commit. I welcome the launch of the One Planet Data Hub, which allows us to compare the decarbonisation path of 400 of the biggest companies. Moreover, emerging countries must phase out carbon, and that is the second big fight for us. Now, if there is a top priority, that is for the emerging countries phase out carbon. Effectively, we must allow developing countries to catch up economically. That's an element of justice, but that catch-up must not be done on the basis of fossil fuels, especially coal, and for a simple reason, and that is today existing plants that are concentrated chiefly in Asia, which will emit enough CO2 to exceed, for us, that will exceed the 1.5 degree target. So while each year we must draw down our fossil fuel-based energy production, just as I speak, we have 500 gigawatts of new coal capacities that are being planned. And you have an absurdity as we speak, a true absurdity to choose coal. And so we need to make a complete U-turn on this subject. First, the G7 countries must set the example. I commend my colleague, Sunyo, who is here with us and who presided this club, who is very courageous on this subject. But the G7 must set the example and commit to putting an end to coal at home before others. So before 2030, France will live up to its commitment to completely close all its plants by 2027 under my own mandate. I can't promise what will happen after me, but that's what I can promise for now. Then the richest countries must also help the developing countries also to phase out coal. Since Glasgow, the G7 has committed close to $50 billion in just transition energy partnerships. The JET-P with Indonesia, Vietnam, South Africa, these are good methods. They must be pursued and disseminated to help the coal phase out. But this also means we must consistent. We must therefore stop subsidizing new coal power plants. The G20 committed to this in Rome in 2021, but we must change the rules when it comes to private financing. As I speak, the private sector has no disincentive to finance a coal plant as opposed to a renewable. That's absurd, and therefore our private markets, our investment systems are massively dysfunctional, and it's really shocking for everyone. Therefore, we must overhaul the system. In the next few years, there must be one rate of interest, if you like, for green and one rate of interest for brown. And if there is one priority for the funders to ensure consistency, it would be to differentiate that rate of interest, which is a major spread because it doesn't integrate the climate risk. And as the way we look at investment today, we're in no way considering properly how we are funding assets which will have depreciated in a few years' time, which are completely inconsistent with our global strategy. We're going to launch this with the World Bank and our partnerships as part of the Coal Transition Accelerator Initiative, which we're launching tomorrow. A third remark, we must commit to placing trade policy for the benefit of the environmental transition. This is another aberration that I want to put on the table here, because we invest in greening our industries at a global, regional level, but at the same time, we continue to liberalize pollutant goods around the planet as if nothing was happening. That's very discouraging, and it's a lose-lose option. I want to say clearly, we do need major efforts in Europe, for example, to decarbonize industry and agriculture. If we continue to have the same trade agreements that we had in the 1980s, 1990s, sometimes agreements that were negotiated over that period that allow us to allow countries to go back to using coal, and then what's the point? Then our producers won't follow us. They'll be right, because so what we must have is a system that allows us to engage everyone on the same strategy. I think we must integrate in the WTO rules our climate rules. We need to bring them into the system, and therefore we need to completely overhaul in that system and integrate a climate clause into the WTO to align our trade regimes with the Paris Accords. And there are a few technical but essential points in that respect. We must be able to subsidize green industry. It could be legitimate, but if it consists with climate benefits, then the WTO needs to look into this. We need to place a tariff on coal like the EU. That's not trade discrimination, but it needs to be done consistently with the goal of zero carbon by 2050. It should not be an instrument to block trade, but it needs to be verified. And we also need to liberalize trade of environmental assets instead of pollutant assets to allow the energy and environmental transition to take place much more quickly. Fourthly, no one should have to choose between combating poverty and the struggle for the climate. This mini revolution, which we launched a few months ago back in Paris, is the Paris Pact for people on the planet. We shouldn't have to choose between climate and combating poverty. Everyone should be able to choose their own path. More public money is needed. We need to mobilize more private money. In 6 months from now, there'll be a 6-month review that will be published during this COP. Macky Sall, the special envoy for the pact, will come with the secretariat, but already we've managed to mobilize much more money together by mobilizing the IMF and World Bank. I thank them. I invite all those who have not yet done so to redistribute their special drawing rights from the IMF. We've already managed to mobilize $110 billion that will allow us to launch in 11 countries today special programs, and those programs will allow us to prevent climate incidents and to combat poverty. We need to generalize this, and it's that commitment of a greater mobilization that we've launched with the Prime Minister Modi. All this more broadly must lead us towards a transformation of the very international financial architecture that was thought of at a time when many of the countries, in many of the countries in this room didn't even exist at the time. So we need to rekindle hope to make it truly inclusive, and this profound transformation of our governance is a priority. Now, one thing I want to stress: we must lose sight of the need for adaptation. Adaptation of agricultural models, particularly in Africa, is a key subject. The Great Green Wall is making progress. I'm very pleased about that, and we shouldn't lose sight of that object where we've mobilized more than 13 million euros together with King Charles. And we also announced an investment of 150 million euros in the next cycle of the International Fund for Agricultural Development. I want to urge here all countries present to participate in December in the replenishment of that fund, which will play a key role in reconciling the agricultural goal and the climate goal. And that is a crucial struggle, because we cannot ask the African countries to choose between the two, between agricultural production or climate. We need both with sustainable models, and the Ukrainian war has shown us that this model is unsustainable, because many countries need fertilizer, and so we must help them so they can produce more at home, but at a much more decarbonized level without coal. And all this is a key element, and that's the agenda that we'll be launching with Kazakhstan tomorrow. It's called One Planet, on the issue of water, to be held in September. I welcome the progress made during this COP, President, when it comes to loss and damage. France will be financing 100 million euros based on governance elements, pending decisions on this subject. But I want to stress a number of points here, because the debate has really stepped up in Sharm el-Sheikh on loss and damage. Thanks very much to my friend Mia Motley, who did outstanding work. But we need to be careful on this issue on a number of points. First of all, let's not confuse the situation of low-income countries and poor countries. We need this fund, but first it must go to the poorest countries above all. We need above all a profound reform of our insurance and reinsurance system, given in the face of climate risk, and this for the middle-income countries that need it. That fund must allow us to carry out that reform, to have a buffer, a guarantee, but we must have mechanisms between which we can distinguish depending on the category of country. I'll say that straight away. We need a simple form of governance. We also need a country-by-country approach. For example, we'll be establishing a first country partnership on adaptation and loss and damage with Bangladesh. France will invest 1 billion euros, so much more than we're putting into the fund now, because that is a specific country approach. We'll invest 1 billion. The IMF will add close to 20 billion dollars thanks to special drawing rights, and this is a key element of this laboratory we want to make on loss and damage. But what we need is an approach, a country-specific approach. Beyond that, we need for that true international taxation, and with Barbados, Kenya, and we are officially launching during this COP an international task force which will have to provide its findings to the G20 in Rio to place international taxation during COP30. That is a necessity that if we want to achieve real results, because we need to raise more money so as to finance our struggle against inequality and for climate. Finally, climate and biodiversity must be addressed together. Therefore, we must stress the fact that we must continue our struggle for nature. Forests, the oceans are part of our COP because they are carbon wells and a lever for extraordinary solutions in the transition. That is why I will take this opportunity to continue to establish, first of all, we need to accelerate when it comes to a real exchange on carbon. We want to invest much more private money to countries who preserve their forests and ecosystems. We raised this in Libreville at the start of the year. We'll conclude with Papua New Guinea, the Congo. The first national the first national forest package. The idea being that we provide public and private loans to countries who save their forests, because we don't have that now. We put a lot of money into carrying out reforestation, but the poor developing countries, their forests are being destroyed to finance much more profitable economic activities. Therefore, there's an urgency to put money into those country-specific approaches and to have a shared methodology, and we'll be investing 500 million euros in the next 4 years in protecting forests following that methodology. And then the oceans are also a priority. It will be our honor to host the UN Conference on the Oceans in 2025. Our ambition there is to develop a real compact for the oceans with a very in-depth international rules to preserve in our EEZs, but also in the high seas, to protect biodiversity, to better regulate fisheries, and to combat illegal fishing and reduce pollution at sea. So those are some of the key elements that I wanted to bring to you in this debate, which are both solutions, commitments on the part of France, and also concerns where we need to step up the common agenda. Thank you very much, President, for your attention. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Hakainde Hichilema, the President of the Republic of Zambia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Your Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan, President of the UAE, Your Excellencies, Head of State and Government, Secretary General of the United Nations, Executive Secretary of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, Mr. Simon Steele, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and privilege for me to address you at this very important climate summit. I also wish to thank the government, the people of UAE for their hospitality to all the delegations since we came here. We've all been looked after very well. Allow me to first and foremost commend Your Highness and the government of the UAE for all of the things that you've been doing over the years in working towards mitigating climate change. This summit, ladies and gentlemen, comes at a time when the world is recording unprecedented levels of temperatures, high temperatures all over the world. and it's sending a clear message that action is needed now, in fact, yesterday, and not tomorrow. We, as Africa, as Zambia, are clear that this summit comes at a time when we cannot tolerate, absolutely not, any lack of action or suboptimal actions at this stage if we are to save our globe from climate damage. It is clear that only a paradigm shift going forward will enable us to address the challenge of climate change effectively and ensure that we avert the devastating effects thereof. We have been on a business as usual path for too long. We cannot continue. Your Excellencies, let me hasten to say that the just transition is inevitable. And in Africa, we have already embarked on a journey where we are working towards ensuring that our energy mix comes from a renewable source base that is acceptable and will meet the minimums that are required to save our planet. We need strong international collaboration in this respect in order for us to successfully undertake the completion of the first global stocktake under the Paris Agreement. We look forward to strengthened commitments that will inform immediate and future climate action, including clear pathways to achieve emission reductions, enhance resilience, and the necessary finance flows to all the needy countries, especially the developing countries. It is also very important that confidence in this multilateral process is restored by delivering on previous commitments that were made. Zambia and Africa as a whole boast of resources, forests, that can help mitigate climate change. But it's very important that as we do what we call carbon trading, one, the markets must be structured, clearly structured, and very, very, very unambiguous. Number two, the pricing of the carbon credits is standardized so that the providers of those resources and the communities that live around there can get a fair return for looking after these forests, for the work they've been doing and the dependence they have on these forests. And only then are we able to attract those communities into the mitigation measures that are necessary. Your Excellencies, this COP28 as a COP of action requires to do a number of things. One, to ensure that the loss and damage fund is fully operational. And we want to thank the countries that have made contributions towards this fund. Number two, to undertake a comprehensive global stocktake exercise and identify clear interventions to bridge the glaring gaps in meeting the goal of the Paris Agreement. Number three, adopt a robust framework on the global goal on adaptation, complete with indicators to ensure that we can collectively track progress in building resilience. Number four, Your Excellencies, share experiences and best practices, especially the countries of the North that have advanced in this area already need to share these best practices with the developing countries. And finally, Your Highness, you can count on the support of the African group of negotiators and Zambia in ensuring that we support all efforts needed to mitigate the negative effects of climate change, as failure is not an option. We all have to succeed, and we have a responsibility to act correctly. I thank you for your kind attention.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, will have a special high-level segment for heads of government. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Fumio Kishida, the Prime Minister of Japan. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
At COP28,
We will conclude the first ever global stocktake. However, the world is not yet on the pathway to 1.5 degrees. In order to make a course correction, our action until 2030 is critical. Achieving the global goal of net zero by 2050, setting the economy-wide absolute reduction target covering all greenhouse gases, and peaking global greenhouse gas emissions by 2025 are all required. Japan aims to reduce its greenhouse gas emissions by 46% by 2030 and will continue strenuous efforts in its challenge to meet the lofty goal of cutting its emission by 50%. Japan has already achieved a reduction of approximately 20%. Japan's reduction is on track. As affirmed at the G7 Hiroshima Summit, it is time for all countries to aim to achieve the common goal of net zero through various pathways that are compatible with economic growth and energy security. Let us all do so together. Japan will implement its growth-oriented carbon pricing concept based on the GX Promotion Act. Next year, we will issue the world's first national transition bond with international certification. We will accelerate GX, which simultaneously achieves the three goals of emission reduction, stable energy supply, and economic growth, thereby contributing to global decarbonization. In Asia, we are working with countries under the framework of the Asia Zero Emission Community, or AZEC, and will hold our first summit meeting this month.
Japan will implement thorough energy conservation and intends to achieve maximum deployment of clean energy through making renewable energy as the main source of power, utilizing nuclear power and other measures. We have a proven record as the world's third largest solar energy provider. In this context, Japan endorses the Presidency's collective goal of tripling renewable energy capacity and doubling the global average annual rate of energy efficiency improvements. At the same time, we aim to create globally a just and sustainable business environment to diversify the clean energy supply chain. On unabated coal power plants, they should be addressed by each country in the course of a respective pathways to net zero, reflecting national circumstances. In line with its pathway to net zero, Japan will end new construction of domestic unabated coal power plants while securing a stable energy supply. Our commitment to mobilize up to approximately $70 billion climate finance from both public and private is also on track. Further, Japan is ready to contribute to the expansion of lending capacity totaling approximately $9 billion through the provision of credit enhancements to the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. We will also make contributions to the new fund of the African Development Bank. Japan will dedicate itself to undertaking actions on climate change, which is our common agenda in cooperation with other countries and leading the efforts of the international community. Thank you very much.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Abiy Ahmed Ali, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencies, heads of state and government,
distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. I come from a country where 70% of the population is youth. And what keeps me awake at night is how to live a better world for future generations. It has been more than 3 decades since climate change is a global political issue. Agreements have been adopted. We have made good strides in combining the climate agenda with the socio-political and economic dimensions of sustainable development, but the assessment of our actions under the global stocktake shows that we are far from the 1.5-degree target. This has a dramatic impact on the most affected countries. While activism is necessary, action is what will get us results. Success can only be measured by the actions we take, not by the decisions we make. As we gather here in the United Arab Emirates, a country recognized for having transformed a desert into a green heaven under the leadership and vision of the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. I applaud the strong commitment of the COP28 presidency to climate action. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Africa is a strong ally in fighting climate change, and we are striving to drive green growth both within the continent and globally. However, we remain highly exposed to the impact of climate despite contributing the least. Recurrent droughts, intensified floods, and livestock loss are some of the many climate shocks that have affected lives and livelihoods of our people over the years. For Ethiopia, the battle to protect and heal our planet is a battle for growth and prosperity. Allow me to highlight a few homegrown solutions we have been implementing towards reducing emission and building resilience. First, the Ethiopian Green Legacy Initiative, a powerful natural-based solution launched in 2019. Over the last 5 years, we established 130,000 nurseries across the country, and yearly, millions of people mobilize in seedling, planting, and seedling management. Our Green Legacy Initiative represents a proactive response to pressing environmental and socio-economical challenges. It reduces carbon emission, preserves our biodiversity, creates jobs, and boosts sectors such as tourism. I am proud to say that this initiative has received remarkable success by planting 32.5 billion seedlings. Our target is to reach 15 billion by 2026. When completed, the initiative will become the largest afforestation project in the world. The impact of our initiative extends beyond borders as we are sharing seedlings with our neighboring countries. It can further play a catalytic role in Africa and complement existing initiatives such as the Africa Forest Landscape Restoration Initiative and the Great Green Wall. Second is our action on transforming our food system. We believe that climate, biodiversity, water, people, and food systems are strongly interrelated. We have successful interventions planting various drought-tolerant crops and using climate-smart irrigation-based technology. Noteworthy is our national wheat production program, whereby we produce 6 million hectares in 1 year, making Ethiopia the largest wheat producer in Africa. This has relieved us from decades of wheat import dependency and made us a wheat exporting country. As part of the Green Legacy Initiative, we have extensively expanded the cultivation of perennial crops and fruits. Furthermore, to diversify sectors prone to the impacts of climate change and promote nutrition-sensitive agriculture, we are increasing our country's supply of poultry, dairy, livestock, and honey through a program called Yelemat Turufat, loosely translated as a bounty of the basket. We have an urban initiative whereby we encourage eco-friendly and resource-efficient greening and farming methods. Our sustainable agricultural practice optimize effective water management and prioritize investments in renewable energy-based irrigation systems. Third, we have been investing extensively in renewable and green energy resources. Ethiopia has the potential to generate over 60,000 megawatts of clean energy by expanding hydropower, solar, wind, and geothermal sources. Our target is to triple our current power generation capacity and double our energy utilization efficiency by 2030. This will allow us to achieve universal access to electricity, minimize dependency on biomass fuel, and provide the opportunity to our industries to reach their net zero targets by 2050. Last are our bold actions in the transport sector. We adopted policies to encourage the use of electrical vehicles that resulted in a sharp increase of hybrid and electric cars on our roads while reducing the macroeconomic burden of importing fuel. Similarly, Ethiopian Airlines is modernizing its fleet by acquiring new energy-efficient aircrafts. Furthermore, we have electrified railways, a growing non-motorized transport infrastructure, and we are expanding our mass transit system. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, these are concrete examples of action. We are actioning our nationally determined contribution, and our progress is a testament to our commitment to the Paris Agreement. I now call upon a collective global action for a stepped-up climate agenda. The major challenge in scaling solution is the cost of capital and how international financing is structured. No country can effectively confront the climate challenge if debt is a burden. This is why the G20 must work to implement bolder and timely debt relief plans to help the most affected countries overcome debt distress, address climate challenge, and pursue more equitable and sustainable economic growth objectives. At the same time, pledged funds must be dispersed. I would like to conclude by urging all parties to negotiate in good faith and come up with innovative outcomes as we collectively tackle the impact of climate change. While you are here working hard for successful COP28 outcomes, I invite you to visit our Green Legacy Pavilion and enjoy a good cup of Ethiopian coffee. I thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Mark Rutte, Prime Minister of the Netherlands. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I want to thank the UAE for being such wonderful hosts to this COP. In preparing for this COP, I asked the youth members of our delegation, the future leaders from the Netherlands, what they expected me to bring home from Dubai. And their answer was clear. They expect us, today's leaders, to deliver on the commitments already made and to step up our efforts on phasing out fossil fuels so we can get on track to reach our 1.5 degree target. I consider that to be our common task over the next 2 weeks. As you may know, the Kingdom of the Netherlands consists of a low-lying delta country in Europe and 6 islands in the Caribbean. So we know what it is like to be vulnerable to climate change and how urgent it is that we take action. As the global stocktake shows, we need to step up our efforts on all pillars of the Paris Agreement, on mitigation, on adaptation, and on climate finance. On climate finance, it's crucial that all parties support the recommendations made by the Transitional Committee on Loss and Damage. All the warning lights are flashing, yet red after yet another year of extreme climate extremes. So it's good that we set up a fund and help the most vulnerable countries. The Netherlands will provide 50 million euros to the startup costs of this fund. On adaptation, it is imperative that we all agree here in Dubai on a specific goal. And a key part of every adaptation strategy must be far better management of flooding, drought, and water pollution. And on mitigation too, we urgently need to scale up our efforts. In my country, the 2030 goal of a 55% reduction in emissions now seems to be within reach for the first time. I won't deny that it is a painstaking process, but the good news is it can be done. In the Netherlands, we are committed to accelerate our efforts. We are investing in large-scale renewable energy with a special focus on green hydrogen both in the Netherlands and abroad. By 2030, we want to provide 100 million people in Africa with access to clean energy. But millions of people need to become billions of people. So I urge all of you here to step up your efforts as well in support of the proposed goal of tripling renewable energy by 2030. Esteemed colleagues, the young people of the world are calling upon us to deliver on our promises, to step up our ambitions, and to work together in embracing our collective responsibility. Let us work tirelessly to secure their future. Thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Pedro Sanchez Perez Castellón, the President of the Government of Spain. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Excellencias, Your Excellencies, the COP in Dubai should be an opportunity
en estos próximos años.
For the next few years. This is Spain's strong wish. This is not a dream. The climate emergency is causing damage, and we are far from fulfilling the fulfillments under Paris. But this is an opportunity to adopt a new climate agenda that is stronger, just, and equitable, that will be driven by the result of the global stocktaking. First, with respect to financing, we need a new architecture that will facilitate access to funds and will eliminate barriers and identify new sources. We must include climate objectives at the center of our economic and fiscal policies and develop robust carbon markets and tackle the problems of debt and increase fiscal space for the most vulnerable countries. But we must also work on a new international tax scheme governed by the principle of the polluter pays and to create conducive environments for investment, innovation, and climate cooperation. As part of our efforts to support our partners, in addition to the funds that we announced at the Climate Ambition Summit in New York, we wish to announce a further contribution of 20 million euros for the new Loss and Damage Fund, in addition to the 5 million euros that was already approved for the operationalization of the Santiago network. It is also urgent to halt deforestation and, more specifically, avert environmental degradation in the Amazon. For this reason, we'll be earmarking 2 million euros this year to environmentally sustainable and socially responsible bonds for Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, and Peru. And with respect to mitigation, we have to maintain the limit at 1.5 degrees. That means the peak should be by 2025, and this should go down in the rest of the decade. And then there are also 3 essential measures. First, we must triple our renewable energy generation capacity by 2030, and then double our energy efficiency objectives in that same decade, and then put an end to the production and consumption of fossil fuels for energy. We have technologies to rethink our energy restructure and to meet these objectives, and Spain is already committed to reducing greenhouse gas emissions by 56% and the objective of renewable energy by 81% to have our last carbon plant in 2025. Lastly, with respect to adaptation and resilience, we need the Paris Agreement to be measurable and operational. We have to explore ways to step up adaptation beyond our national plans. And for this reason, Spain supports the Secretary General's initiatives to have early warning systems for everyone and to accelerate the portfolio of adaptation projects. I conclude by saying, Excellencies, that our collective efforts moving forward show that we still have an opportunity to save the planet, but we have to step up our ambition and our commitment, but I believe that it is within humanity's reach. Thank you. That's it.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome Her Excellency Ms. Mette Frederiksen, the Prime Minister of Denmark. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, much is being said and written about the time we are currently living in. A time of conflict and competition, where new wars are testing us, while old conflicts continue to create despair for millions of civilians around the world. Where global tensions are reaching new highs, while inflation, poverty, food insecurity remain unsolved challenges. And in the middle of all this division, we are facing the biggest common challenge we have yet seen: climate change. Challenge that no country or continent can face alone. The easy thing would be to put off the difficult decisions, because it simply requires too much of us. That can, of course, never be the answer. Therefore, we need to take upon the responsibility, show what we are capable of, how we can turn things around if we choose to work together. And the developed countries and the biggest emitters have to do the most. No country in the world have the right to say, we are doing enough. That also goes for my own country. We all need to do more. At this COP, Denmark has 3 focus points. We are working for an agreement to phase out fossil fuels, global targets to triple renewable energy, and double energy efficiency. And we need to do more for those countries that are hit the hardest by climate change. Access to financing, that has to be a key pillar on climate action. That is why we contribute to mobilize more than 1% of the $100 billion pledge. And that is why Denmark, of course, welcomes the Abu Dhabi Agreement on Loss and Damage. Now, allow me to share a few words on behalf of the Faroe Islands and Greenland. The Faroe Islands are a seafaring nation. We need to expand the efforts of energy transition in the maritime sector to include fishing vessels. Communities in Greenland experience some of the worst effects by climate change, even though they have contributed the least. In the Arctic, climate change is happening 4 times faster. And on behalf of the people of Greenland, including the Inuit people, let us act. Ladies and gentlemen, COP28 is our chance to act, to keep the 1.5-degree target alive, and to secure a livable planet for generations to come. We need to do more. Thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. It is my pleasure to welcome His Excellency Mr. Rishi Sunak, Prime Minister of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Your Excellency, you have the floor.
As we conclude the first global stocktake, we must be brutally honest. Although we've made great progress together, the world is just not moving fast enough. Climate science shows that we're off track, and climate politics is close to breaking point, because the gap between pledges and delivery is undermining credibility. While we make new commitments here, major emitters must dramatically accelerate delivery of what they've already promised. We all need to do more. And we must address the disconnect between lofty rhetoric on stages like this and the reality of people's lives around the world. And the way to do that is by delivering a truly just transition. Let me be clear, the United Kingdom is totally committed to net zero, the Paris Agreement, and to keeping 1.5 alive. That's why we've decarbonized faster than any other major economy. Our 2030 target means the deepest cuts of any major emitter, and we're determined to deliver. But instead of putting more pressure on working people, we're choosing a pragmatic new approach. We're ramping up renewables and embracing the opportunities of technology and green industry, because we've shown that you can cut emissions while growing the economy and creating jobs. Now, those facing the worst impacts of climate change are desperate for the world to do more. So we're also working to deliver a just transition globally, and that means more support for those most in need. The UK is already one of the largest global climate donors, and we're tripling our adaptation finance. I've announced a further £1.6 billion for the Green Climate Fund, the UK's biggest single international climate commitment. And today, we've gone further with an additional £1.6 billion of support for clean energy and innovation, and to deliver on the historic Glasgow Forest deal, because we can't get to net zero without nature. This also includes up to £60 million for loss and damage, £40 million of which is for the new fund. And to succeed, the fund must be open to all sources of support. And because the UK is a world-leading green finance centre, we're also helping to unlock trillions in private finance to meet this need and keep 1.5 degrees within reach. I believe we can deliver here in Dubai, but we've got to work together. The debate is too divided. Developed versus developing, ambition on mitigation versus finance for transition and adaptation. The truth is simple. We need both. In place of division, we need ambitious collective action, like we promised in Paris and Glasgow. That's how we'll get back on track, by bringing everyone with us. Because a truly just transition leaves absolutely no one behind. Thank you.
I thank you, Your Excellency, for your statement. Your Excellencies, dear delegates, the joint second meeting of COP28, CMP 18 and CMO 5 is now suspended.